Hello guys and welcome! In this video I would like to talk about potential flaws in a potentially great game in Final Fantasy Rebirth. The last time I did a video like this was for Final Fantasy 16 and it was quite accurate, so let's see if I can do it even better this time. To do this, I will separate the game into 3 categories: story and pacing, characters and growth, as well as gameplay and combat. The video will contain minor spoilers from the Final Fantasy series, but I will also issue a major spoiler warning for Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VII Remake, as well as Crisis Core. So if you haven't played those, beware. Also, if you would like to join the discussion in anything I say, feel free to leave a comment and I will answer as fast as I can in the comment section. Starting off with story and pacing. And the first thing that comes to mind is the risky changes from the original. Listen, I'm very excited about what they're doing here. Not to know exactly what's going on and to be lost in my favorite world once again feels fantastic. That said, not all the things that happened in Final Fantasy Remake were all roses and sunshine. The fate thingies / dementors and everything surrounding them felt mostly weird. And it continued through most of the game. This was followed by the Arbiters of Fate boss fight. That was cool, but kind of didn't fit the theme at all. And later this fight was topped off with what felt like a very forced encounter with Sephiroth, that at least in my opinion felt far too early. Another thing that did kind of bother me with the story was the introduction of a potential second timeline or something like that. This certainly feels like a step into territory of convoluted mess that begs for plot holes in the name of fan service. Which is something I'm not very fond of. Do we really need Zack back? Do we need potentially 2 Sephiroths running around wreaking havoc? Do we need a surviving Avalanche crew? I leave that up to you. What do you think? To top this all off, Final Fantasy's track record of making plots far more complicated than what they have to be is kind of legendary by now. Everything from mind control from the moon, time paradoxes, dreams among fates, godly space popes, and even aliens existing in several places at the same time simultaneously are all cool and all, but it kind of makes each game of the series a hit or miss depending on who you speak to. Especially when paired with a constant change of gameplay and combat, but more on that later. Okay, off to the second point. Characters and growth. The characters are actually what worries me the least. If Rebirth handled each character as well as the remake did by staying true to the original characters while fleshing out their backstories even more, we are looking at another potential masterpiece here. However, we still do have a few obvious question marks here where the game can decide to take a few different turns. The most obvious one of course being Sid. I mean, the dude is a hothead who swears each second sentence, chain smokes, and that would most likely be called a misogynist by today's standards. So the question becomes, how will he be handled? Will they give him a total remake, or actually try to create a PG version of him? If they go with a second alternative, how will they do it? Will they add gibberish swear words and remove his cigarette only? Or are they going for a personality change as well? What do you guys think? I am also worried about how they would handle Zack if he potentially shows up from a different timeline from a character's perspective. This since it would kind of open up a lot of drama between Cloud, Zack and Aerith, and it could actually destabilize the original party composition. Also, how will Sephiroth be handled here? In the remake he was kind of a loose cannon that showed up everywhere and acted outside of the original timeline. In a way, he would confuse almost everyone, except maybe the most hardcore Kingdom Hearts fans who are used to this type of convoluted writing.
I fought with Ansem, with Xehanort's Heartless. When it invaded my heart and I won. But to use the power of darkness, I had to become Ansem myself.
Yeah. So, about Sephiroth. Will he continue his grand plan of becoming a space god, or is he now acting out of spite only? Maybe his true plan isn't even revealed yet. Heck, maybe it isn't even Sephiroth at all, but Jenova. Who even knows anymore? There of course are some other small nitpicks considering characters, but they're so small that I'm not going to mention them here. So feel free to add questions to the discussions in the chat. But to me, the most important aspect of the characters is that they kind of stay true to the original counterparts in the first Final Fantasy VII game. This, since it would be a disservice to the original game as well as the new fans to totally rewrite the characters. This in turn may disconnect the games from one another even more than the new style of adventure have already done. If new fans are booting up the original Final Fantasy VII after playing Rebirth, I want them to feel the same connection with the characters that made me love the first game so much, even though the script might differ. I would much rather want a new game to complement the character's backstory similar to how they did with Jesse in the remake. This seems better to me than to rewrite them totally to fit another narrative. But what do you guys think? Lastly, we have arrived to the last category, being gameplay and combat, and this is probably the most heated topic. To start this off, I would like to say that I really did like the combat in the remake a lot, as it felt like a great medium between action and ATB. It surely had flaws, but for once, a Final Fantasy game seems to be sticking with the same combat systems for 2 games in a row, giving them an actual chance to refine the product instead of starting over again. That said, I still have my worries, both in regards of the game itself, as well as the things taken from the previous game. Let's start with the thing that worries me the most here, that being the open world or semi-open world itself, as they tend to be very repetitive by nature, both in the sense of side quests and combat. When talking about the side quests, Final Fantasy series have always been kind of a hit or miss in this respect, but lately I feel like they have been even worse. 15, 16 and 7 Remake all had side quests, but the majority were unfortunately more tedious than good and felt like a means to prolong the gameplay rather than to make it a good one.
This sucks.
On top of that, they were also most of the time poorly rewarded. This trend worries me, and as much as I look forward to exploring the world, I really hope that the content feels thought through and not just added for the sake of it. I will try to look on it in a positive way, as some of the ideas in Final Fantasy VII Remake were good, so there is a chance that they might nail it. However, with the recent track record, I'm bracing myself a bit here. Another thing that I would like to link directly to this is the enemy variety. In an open world, this is actually far more important than one would think, since a lack of variety will make the fight seem more repetitive while exploring. Of course, I do think that the variety will be better than in the remake, but I still feel that we have to be prepared for some tedious repetitive encounters throughout the game, especially for us completionists. Now, let's take some time to specifically talk about the combat. I would first like to mention what bothered me in the Final Fantasy remake, as it laid the groundwork for the combat in Rebirth as well. So, for example, I cannot talk about this without mentioning aerial combat. In the remake, this felt very clunky and awkward. Fortunately for us, it was mostly fixed in the Integrate DLC, and hopefully it will get even more polished, so I'm actually not too worried about it. Another thing that I found annoying in Final Fantasy VII remakes was the stun locks and interruptions, as they got unnecessarily annoying, especially on trash mobs. In the Rebirth, I really hope that they manage to deal with this, as the game flow is of higher importance in an open world, but I can also definitely see it being a thing of unnecessary annoyance. Let's hope they don't leave it unattended. A more nitpicky issue that at least I had problem with in the remake was that the bosses felt kind of spongy. I mean, I did like most of the boss fight, and I liked the several phases that they had, but some of the bosses took far too much time to defeat, and it felt kind of tedious. Me myself may not be the best player around, and I might have dragged out for more than necessary, so I don't know how valid this criticism actually is. This also causes me to not have too high hopes that the new game might actually be different. Another personal nitpick I have similar to the spongy bosses is that the ATB gauge feels far too slow for AI-controlled party members. I do realize that the game wants me to constantly switch in attack as well as blocking with different characters, but personally, I prefer to play the game with one character and control the abilities of the rest. As I said earlier, I'm not the best player. I will not cry if they stick with it as it was in the remake, but I would be happy if they improved the AI a little bit. But maybe that is just me. What do you all think? And there we have it. My worries for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Do you have any other ideas of discussions we can have? And if you liked this video, please check my channel for similar content like this, and maybe even leave a like. Anyway guys, until next time, hej då!